And do you want to try and squeeze Kelly and your report in, or?
Kelly's priority. I don't think I have anything.
Okay. So, Ms. Dyer, let's invite you up, and we'll run that one into the ground and then get out of here. I remember the conversation on the fog being a pretty long conversation last time, too. So I guess my input would be when it comes back to us again, maybe want to set aside some time, because there'll be 2 additional people here that want to chat about it, too.
Okay.
So.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, good
Morning.
Water Commissioners, Councilmember Sneddon. My name is Kelly Dyer. I'll be giving the drought update and annual water supply management report this morning. And so we will discuss the drought status, our demand status, water supply status, our water supply strategy, and also the 2018 annual water supply management report. So drought status, rainfall for the year, Gibraltar's at about 4.78 inches. Kachuma has seen 2.88 inches, and downtown Santa Barbara has seen 3.74 inches. So it's actually looking better than it has in previous years. We're pretty close to normal rainfall, which has been nice to see. This is a chart showing the drought monitor for the entire state of California. The federal agencies have now put us into a extreme drought condition, so they upped our category, and you can see the rest of the state is looking pretty dry as well. Just a reminder that we have already experienced the 7 driest consecutive years in our region. We're now in the 8th year of drought, and we have been in a drought emergency, which has been maintained for several years. And I'm pleased to show the 3-month look ahead of precipitation. It's the first time in quite a long time that we've seen something like this, where the state is showing chances of above normal precipitation for the next 3 months. So we'll keep our fingers crossed, but we also continue to plan for continued drought conditions because we know that these forecasts can change. This is our demand status. So for the month of November, we had 22% conservation, which brings our 12-month running average to 28%. I will say as we get into winter months, it's we have less discretionary water use. People aren't watering as much outside, so percentage-wise, it's harder to achieve the target than it is in the summertime. But I think what's happening is we're seeing the effect of our new production meters that went in last spring, so that has brought our conservation numbers down. Right now we're at 28%. The target is 30%, and a lot can change over the winter with rainfall. So by next spring, we will be coming back with some recommendations on what to do regarding the conservation target. We do want to verify and do some checking on the numbers with the new meters and make sure that everything is looking accurate before we make any recommendations, but that's something we're diligently looking into over the next few months.
I have just a question about this figure compared to the figure 2A in our report.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I don't understand, like when it says system demand acre feet per month, and then this says City of Santa Barbara water demand, but they don't really match.
The difference is this is a monthly chart, so it's showing demands by month. And then the chart you're looking at in the report is total annual demands. So it's tracking the 12-month. It'd be the sum of these would be one data point on the chart you're looking at.
So can I just, maybe you don't have to answer this now, but at some point I'm interested in that the demand appears to be going up.
Mm-hmm.
And when we look at this monthly, the demand appears to be trending down, and that's something I just have a constant question about. That
Sure. So
address.
the reason is you're seeing on a seasonal basis, the demands will go down in the winter months. People tend to irrigate less in the winter and more in the summer. The annual chart that you're looking at is that our total annual demands over the last 12 months has an uptick. And the reason, one of the reasons, and we're looking into this, but we believe it's because we replaced those production meters last spring, which has increased the total production on the system. And it's likely, by the way, those meters are replaced around April timeframe. And so the chart you're looking at that showing the uptick, we might see that uptick until April of this year, at which point it might level off, because then you'll have a full year of data with the new meters. This chart shows our water sales revenue by month, and the reason we show this chart is just to see if we have any issues with revenue, since much of our revenue is dependent on the amount of water that's used. Right now, our revenues are tracking as projected, and our metered sales seem to be tracking as we would expect as well. Gibraltar Reservoir is currently at about 2,700 acre-feet of storage. We continue to have challenging water quality with high turbidity and high TOC, although we have been able to continue diverting water it's at about 4 acre-feet per day, so 135 acre-feet per month. It's actually been better than what we expected. Our supply projections assumed we couldn't use Gibraltar after October, so the fact that we were able to continue diverting through November and December has been a good thing. And it's diverting enough to continue operating our hydroelectric plant, so it is generating electricity. Kachuma's storage is currently 59,000 acre-feet. That's about 31% of capacity. Of that amount, the city's stored supply is 8,436. We do have the largest amount of carryover in Kachuma as compared with the other Kachuma member units, which puts us at risk if the water levels continue to decline. If the drought continues, we're at risk for some significant hits on evaporation. So we'll be working with the other member units in the county and reclamation on our evaporation management plans. In terms of the emergency pump facility, projections are showing that would need to be operational by fall, so a decision would need to be made by COME this spring regarding the notice to proceed. And this chart is just the comparison of Kachuma storage in the last drought, which is the black line. The current drought is the green line. And so Kachuma storage is right at about when we hit this emergency declaration a few years ago. And with the forecasted rainfall, we're hoping that we get one of these storm events that causes some inflows to the lake. That would be sometime in the next 3 months when an event like that could happen. So imported water, our strategy is to continue to maximize our deliveries to Kachuma. That's about 280 acre-feet per month for the city. That water, it has been just passed through Kachuma, and so we currently have none of it stored at Kachuma. We have about 680 acre-feet left in San Luis Reservoir from the water that was made available in calendar year 2018. In addition, we received our initial allocation from the State Department of Water Resources. It was a 10% allocation, so that's 330 acre-feet to the city. Fairly low allocation, so we'll hopefully there's some storms up north that would increase that in the coming months. With that low 10% allocation, we are continuing to pursue supplemental water purchases, we would like to continue maximizing the pipe capacity Kachuma and bringing in the water. So we've been looking at up to 2,800 acre feet of additional purchases. There is an opportunity with Mojave Water Agency. It's the same deal that we had last year, which has been, it's a fairly good deal compared with others that we've seen in the past. It's $320 per acre foot purchase price. It is a 4-to-1 exchange, so for every 4 acre feet that we receive, we'd have to give 1 acre foot back over a 10-year period. And when we give it back to them, we have to pay the transportation costs, which is about 250 acre feet. And this would be to maintain deliveries, I think this should say through spring of 2020 for 1 more year. We did sign a letter of intent to purchase the water, but it is non-binding. So if conditions change this spring and we don't need to purchase all of that water, we can still back out. Our water debt is currently 3,700 acre feet. If we do this Mojave Water Agency purchase, it would be an additional 700 acre feet of water debt.
When you say maintain the maximum delivery, that's our pie slice of the pipe?
Correct.
Right. And remind me, we have to do that or else we potentially give up that pie slice, right? Or some of it?
If we don't use our portion of the pipe capacity, it would be available to others for their use.
Okay. And then we wouldn't get it back until they were willing to give up, right?
It's actually, we have rights to that proportional share. So it's only in the event that we don't use it that someone else can. If we decide we want to use our proportional share, we have first dibs, first rights to it.
Thanks.
So groundwater, we continue to monitor for seawater intrusion and water levels. We just have our annual surface water and groundwater monitoring agreement that you saw today that will be going to council. And we have been resting our basins for the winter period, although we continue to exercise them regularly in case they need to be brought back online. We're also planning some rehab on some of our wells in order to maximize the production capacity, the rates that they produce water. If drought continues, we'll plan to bring about 4 wells online this spring. So we'll continue to monitor our supply conditions. Desal project continues to operate in full production, and we have been working on the draft term sheet for the water sales agreement with Montecito Water District, and are planning to bring that to council either January or February, which should be coming soon. And recycled water, there's really no change in status here. The plant is online and is currently meeting all of our system demands.
Just a comment. Back dealing with the Montecito water sales, you just recently went to council with a staff report. I found, I check council agendas every week, and I found that really informative. Yes, we're not involved in it, but it was really informative. Just a request that things like that go forward, those items that we're not, quote unquote, involved in, not in our turf, but if they're in a link to that to the board, to the commission, just to look at. That report I thought had a lot of information which would have been of interest if you guys didn't see it. It was a pretty detailed report. So anyway, just a comment.
And this is our water supply strategy. No change since the last meeting. Purple is recycled water. Dark blue is Kachuma water. We're currently in year 8. And so this year we're planning on using more of our Kachuma water that was stored up as carryover from previous years. This is based on the 20% allocation that we received in October. And then Gibraltar is the light blue. Groundwater is the yellow. State water is orange, and then desal is the dark green. So we have sufficient supplies for the next couple of years. There is a small gap out 3 years from now, and we'll have to wait to see what happens with the precipitation this spring, and come back this spring on how to address this shortfall. 2018 Water Supply Management Report. So the purpose of this report, it is backwards looking. It summarizes our water supplies last water year, 2018. It is a requirement of our State Water Project EIR that we make findings that our groundwater basins are in long-term balance. So this shows our water supply mix, what was planned at the beginning of the water year versus what actually happened. Overall, a lot of the supplies were tracking as planned. The big difference you see here is that instead of using Kachuma water, the blue, we ended up just passing through and using all of our state water, which was the orange, which means that we had more Kachuma carryover built up in Kachuma right now, and we have no state water stored in Kachuma. So that's the reason. But overall, things, I think, tracked as planned. Groundwater. So with the city's management of our groundwater supplies, we conjunctively use it and do what's called in lieu recharge. So what that means is that when we have other supplies available, like our surface waters reservoirs are full, we don't really pump from our basins, and we allow natural recharge to build them up. We really only use our groundwater basins during droughts and emergencies. And so this is a chart of our groundwater basins. You can see our storage unit 1 covers largely the downtown area, and we have several wells in that basin. Most of them are connected to the Ortega groundwater treatment plant. We have one well, the Alameda well, that is not, and that one is, we have a pipeline in design right now to connect that well for treatment as well. Foothill Basin is up here. We have 3 wells in the Foothill Basin. And then we have storage unit 3, which is not used for potable use, but it has some non-potable. We have 1 well in that basin for non-potable use. So Foothill Basin is a shared basin. There are several other pumpers in that basin that, and the multi-year drought yield assumes 8,130 acre feet would be available to the city over a 10-year period. Last year, we did not produce any water from that basin because we had surface water available. We ended up resting it. The remaining yield is estimated to be about 3,800 acre feet in storage. The water levels are near 1992 levels. We have about 60 monitoring wells between Foothill and Storage Unit 1. So we've just selected a few for examples to show in a chart the water levels over time. This was the red is the city's pumping. The green down here is pumping by others. So this is the last drought, the amount of pumping that happened in Foothill. And you can see what happened with the water levels. And then after the drought ended, we didn't really pump much at all, and the water levels went back up. Then we started having some water quality issues. This was before we had built the ozone treatment at Cater, so we needed our wells for blending for water quality purposes. And then we got hit with the drought. So we've had quite a bit of pumping over this period, and water levels are now down back where they were 1992 levels. And it will probably take some time to replenish that basin. Although there is, even 1992 isn't the lowest the basin ever was. Back in the 1950s, Foothill Basin was actually lower. So that's how we know we have some remaining yields left in that basin. Storage Unit 1 is an assumed yield of about 16,000 acre feet over a 10-year period. That basin, the city's the only known substantial pumper in that basin. So we're not aware of anyone else who has large production wells in the downtown area. Last year we produced about 450 acre feet, and the remaining yield is about 10,500 acre feet. We do monitor this basin for seawater intrusion. Our Alameda and high school wells are the farthest inland here, so to the extent we can pump those, it minimizes the amount of seawater intrusion that would occur. Here's a chart of our water levels in storage unit 1 going back to the last drought, which is the red. The red is the pumping that occurred, and then these lines up here are the water levels. And then after the last drought, we stopped pumping for quite a while, and here we've been pumping. And the water levels in storage unit 1 respond very quickly to pumping. That's because that basin is under pressure. It's a confined basin, so you'll see it's very responsive, and even when we stop pumping, the water levels bounce right back up. The bigger concern is seawater intrusion in storage unit 1. So here's a map of some of our seawater intrusion monitoring wells, and I've selected just a few for example. The first ones are right near the coast, right here. And you can see this is, it's a little hard to read, but this is chloride concentrations, and it goes back all the way to after the last drought. And so we have seen an increase in chlorides right near the coast, which is an indicator that seawater intrusion is happening right near the coast. This is a little farther inland, about halfway between the coast and 101. Here's chloride concentrations from the last drought, which after we stopped pumping, you can see eventually the seawater subsided and chloride concentrations went away just in time for us to go into the next drought. And we've seen an uptick in chlorides, so there is some seawater intrusion happening this far inland. Next one is the 101, and this is really this is our point where if we start to see chloride concentrations at this location, we would be shutting down our wells because we don't really want chlorides to go in any further. That's sort of our buffer area. That's what we consider the acceptable level of seawater intrusion. So we're still fine at that location. We haven't seen any chlorides. Storage unit.
So back a ways, that 10,000 acre foot of projected available water there, is that before you would have intrusion, or just with the amount that's there available?
So that is based on our most recent USGS study, which assumed a 10-year drought, and it assumed we would allow seawater intrusion up to the 101.
Okay. So there's more water there, but in excess of that would allow it past 101?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Storage unit 3, as mentioned, is a little more challenging water quality, so we really only use it for non-potable use. We'd have to put in a treatment plant out there, and the yield is pretty small. The safe yield to the city is about 200 acre feet per year. Last year, we produced about 26 acre feet, which went into the recycled water system, and it's really just only used when the plant is down for maintenance or repairs. So timing, next steps, after this meeting, we will be posting our annual water supply management report, which I'm here to receive feedback on today. We'll be posting it for public access, and then going to council January 29th is the current tentative date. So if you have any comments on the report, I certainly welcome them today. You can also review and read the report. We're accepting comments all the way up through January, so you can send them to myself, and we'll make sure they get incorporated.
Comments, questions? I'll just make my usual comment on my dislike of that red bar at the top of the water source chart to still give the impression that we'll ever go back to 14,000 acre feet a year or something. In fact, you had a slide in there. There was another one that had just two bars with the large red on top of it about the conservation. I'm just going, I just don't think the norm is all that conservation anymore. I think the norm is that with no conservation, and that's our new starting point. And I hope someday we get past that chart. So,
Mr. Chair, only comment I had is I've been reading a lot lately about the concept of a mega drought lasting, much longer than 10 years into 100 years for the Southwest. And as we get into our long-term water supply plan, I start to see us borrowing water and continuing to borrow water, but it will be an interesting gymnastic exercise when we get to the long-term water supply plan to look at a scenario for essentially the new norm, a mega drought, which is essentially where we're at. Picking up on your thing, we're never going back. We're never going back. And if you take out that bar for purchased water, right, we're going to have to make that up in desal, and it's going to be a good exercise.
That's a good point. And I think in our next long-term water supply plan, we're wanting to look at the effects of climate change on our supplies. There's a lot of models out there that might show quantitatively what happens. And I think Commissioner Keller has been working with his students. We might see something that out of their studies as well. But it's, if we don't know if this is going to be 7 years, 10 years, and Colorado River's been on a 20-year drought cycle. So we can use the models that model climate change impacts to come up with some kind of quantitative estimate of how it will affect our supplies. But then the question is how much we want to trust the models, or do we want to use some other assumptions or scenarios to kind of take a more conservative approach.
Yeah, I was going to say, I wanted to mimic the old Dr. Keller, Barry Keller, who would always bring up the mega drought, the geologic mega droughts. Mm-hmm. And so, again, when we get to the long-term water supply plan, looking at those models is going to be very interesting. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Just want to add to that, too. I like that you've changed calling it extraordinary conservation and leaving that white bar in there. I think it's helpful to see that because we can see that with our continued extraordinary conservation that we're even able to make it at all. And I think that's important messaging. If we take that down to new normal without leaving that white bar in there labeled extraordinary conservation, I think people think, oh, our water supply is taken care of. So I like that the white bar stays in there and that it's labeled that way. And I just really have to commend you for always balancing this water supply strategy in such incredible times. And I think when we start looking at longer term, again, strategies, we can look at our last 8 to 10 years to make our plan for the next 8 to 10 years. And even without relying on models or other things that might be controversial, we can just look at our own history here, shows that we can't expect to get more than that. And then I have a question about some of those things like the Mojave water exchanges or things like that. What if we don't have one to give back later for every 4 that we're getting now, which is
We borrow it again.
which we'll have to look at long term. But for this right now, I think is excellent and makes the points. And I would like to keep that bar in there showing extraordinary conservation.
Okay, thanks. Does anybody have a subcommittee report that's necessary?